information to pop up. There it is. All right, welcome. My name is Will Moss. I am the CEO of HBCU Connect. I'm going to be your moderator. For those of you guys that are just joining us, please make sure to stay on mute so we can minimize any distractions for this awesome live event with the Microsoft Security, Compliance, and Identity Management team. They've got some awesome opportunities. We've got some awesome panelists that are going to present and introduce themselves, their path to Microsoft, what they currently do at Microsoft, the opportunities and the teams that they work on and what that looks like. And we're going to allow you the opportunity to interact and engage by leveraging the chat here within Microsoft Teams. So if you're just now joining us, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, drop your LinkedIn profile. And then as you start to meet some of our presenters this evening, you can ask questions as they finish up presenting. So if for example, our keynote is Alem. So he's going to present. If he says something that sparks your interest, make sure to drop a question or comment in the chat for Alem to take a look at after he finishes up and we start introducing our other panelists. So we're super excited to be here. Like I said, I'll be your moderator. You're in the right place at the right time. So what I like to do first on our Microsoft HBCU Connect events is to cover the agenda so that you guys know exactly what we're going to cover, to set a little bit of the expectations for the event and to make sure that you get the most out of this hiring event. So first things first, I'll do a quick welcome, a quick 3-minute welcome. And what I want to do within that welcome is not only introduce myself, talk a little bit about HBCU Connect in the case that this is your first time attending one of our events. But the other thing I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the history between Microsoft and HBCU Connect, and then how that leads up to the opportunity here for you today. Next thing I'll do is introduce our keynote speaker, who is Alemu, Principal Group Engineering Manager. So Alan's going to give the keynote address, talk a little bit about a high level of the organization, a little bit more about Microsoft, a little bit about himself as well. After the keynote introduction or keynote speaker, I'm going to introduce you to the panelists and team members from Microsoft SCIM. So you'll meet the team. You'll have the opportunity to know who you are talking to, who is here from the event to represent, not only the company, but the hiring organization, so that you have an opportunity as you get to know them and their backgrounds to ask some good questions as you prepare to potentially interview for careers in this hiring organization. After they've introduced themselves, right, and you get to know them, you get to ask them questions, then we're going to have a panel discussion. So I've prepared some questions from a cultural perspective to get the conversation started that I'm going to ask each of the team members to get them engaged and help you guys see a little bit more about what it is like to work at Microsoft and specifically SCIM. So I've got some questions that are lined up for our panel discussion, but then also I want to blend in questions from you all from the chat. So if you have questions that you would like for me to ask, you're going to have the opportunity to do that in our live Q&A. After the live Q&A, you've asked your questions, we've got to know the team. Hopefully you're excited about the opportunities. We're going to talk about next steps on how you can potentially land an interview and be hired for this great opportunity. All right, so with that being said, let me go ahead and start with our welcome. Now, for those of the candidates that are just now joining us, you do not have to turn on your video feed. You can kind of relax and sit back and chill. You can make sure you stay on mute, but what I will encourage you to do, once you turn off your video feed, is to engage in the chat. And the folks that we'll focus on in our video feed will be the Microsoft team members. Cool. All right, so my name is Will Mouse. Like I said, I'm CEO of HBCU Connect. If this is your first time engaging with us and our organization for this event, welcome. We're super excited to have you. And if this is not your first event, but it is your introduction to the Microsoft SCIM team, welcome as well. We're super excited to have you. So what we like to do is we like to present opportunities. We started a relationship with Microsoft about 10 years ago, where Microsoft came to hbcuconnect.com, started to post jobs with us, started to do some online recruitment, started to move the needle on opportunities and applicants that were applying to jobs at Microsoft. But Microsoft, being the forward-thinking company that they are, we had a discussion with one of the HR leaders at the time, that said, hey, Will, this is great. You know, we see all of the traffic, HBCU Connect is driving candidates, but how do we make sure that candidates from HBCU Connect, you know, African-American professionals, and eventually later on, Latinx professionals as well, how do we make sure that they get a good look from our hiring managers and our recruiters? And then they put the ball into our court. We listened to that feedback, and we came up with the idea of doing exactly what they were asking for, what Microsoft was asking for, by hosting professional recruitment events in a networking format to allow our candidates the opportunity to have face time, to meet some of the recruiters, meet some of the hiring managers, meet some of the team members, to learn more about the opportunities. And then as a next step to that, interviews, and then potentially folks being hired after that event. So we started doing events about 8 years ago, started doing them all over the country. We were in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, the Midwest. We were in Atlanta, New York, Texas, you know, Dallas and Houston, California, and even in Seattle, we posted events. But then fast forward to COVID-19, you know, we didn't want to do any more physical events because of, you know, the pandemic. But kudos to Microsoft. They said, hey, let's not cancel our events that we have queued up. Let's just host them online. So one of the first teams that we were going to host an online event for was the Microsoft Teams group. They were actually hiring. So we used Microsoft Teams to host our first virtual event with Microsoft. And the rest is sort of history. We started to do, instead of doing maybe 6 to 8 events per year, we started to do, you know, 6 to 8 events per month. Not only with Microsoft and different organizations with Microsoft, but with different companies as well. So fast forward to this opportunity for you today. These are real jobs and real opportunities. The team that is here today is hiring, right? The reason that they partner with us is to give you guys an opportunity to learn more about them, to ask questions, to get excited about interviewing and going through the interview process to potentially land a job. So you should know that people get hired from these events quite often, very frequently. And even as recently as the last email blast I sent out, I had 3 people that came back and said, hey, I won't be attending because I got hired from your last event. So you guys are in the right place at the right time to learn more, to get your resume tight, to ask those questions on the, you know, the type of experience you need to bring out and show that you have, and then potentially land an interview with the Microsoft SCIM team. All right, so that's it for my intro. Without further ado, let me introduce Alemu, the Principal Group Engineering Manager within Microsoft SCIM. So Alem, if you're ready.
I am. Thanks for the introduction, Will. Yeah, looking forward to see candidates come out of this one, meet some of you either in LinkedIn or even in an interview loop. And like Will said, we've done this event in the past and we've had success with it. So looking forward to it. Alemeshet Alemu, I go by Alem. I am joined today with a few of my Microsoft counterparts who were in different parts of the organization under the SCIM, Security, Compliance, Identity, and Management. We'll start out with a quick intro, then we'll give you a high-level introduction of what Microsoft does and the various business spaces. It'll be very high level, and narrow it down to what my immediate organization does, and we'll hand it off to the next person from Microsoft to introduce. I'm on LinkedIn, so would love to connect with you. Feel free to reach out. I'm currently what you call a group engineering manager. What that is manager of managers. I have some teams here in Redmond, one team in Atlanta. Michael will be speaking in a little bit about that. Originally from Ethiopia, that's where I was born, all the way through college, first degree. I earned my BSc in electrical and computer engineering, then found myself here in the US to pursue master's. That was a short 17 years ago. And since then, US has been home, and majority of the time here in Redmond area. 14 years at Microsoft, again, does not feel like 14 years, but it has. It goes by pretty quickly. So past roles. My first role coming out of college was to be an instructor at the university I graduated from. Did that for a little bit. Did some network admin type of role along with being an instructor. Decided to pursue my master's that brought me here in the US. Then I joined Microsoft. Back then, I had an older brother who worked for Microsoft. I was a poor, broke college student, needed a place to crash. I came here in Redmond. I crashed at his apartment back then, landed a job at Microsoft. Then, grew as a software engineer. Now find myself doing more of group engineering management. That's a little bit about myself. Will, if you can advance it to the next slide, I can give you a high level about Microsoft. So I was thinking about how to introduce Microsoft, and I want to take it from the lens of the products you may have exposure to and the products As any organization, there's the CEO. Under that CEO, there are executive vice presidents, and each of those lead different business areas. Office suites, Word, PowerPoint, Excel. I'm sure you've used that at one point in your career. That's one division. And we're also in the devices space. We produce Surface and different SKUs of devices. We're in gaming. If you're a gamer, Xbox Series X has been pretty tight. Still shows out of stock when I checked. We're in cloud computing with Azure. This is where if you wanted to host a website, host a service, and you don't need to manage those servers, you just host it in the cloud. Thank you. So you can use Azure. As some of your developers, you probably know about Visual Studio. We have tools for developers and developer community, GitHub and Visual Studio and so on. We have research organizations which look for what next, what can be productized, and so on and so forth. Now, this is a big organization, and I'll narrow it down to my immediate organization does. So if you see the little star at the bottom left corner, if you will, it says Intune. That's the product area that my immediate team works in. And a few of my partners here are in the next level organization, the security, compliance, identity, and the management. I'll be talking about the management side, and we have representatives from the security and compliance side who can say more when they introduce themselves. Next slide will tell you a little bit about what Intune is. Intune, also known as Microsoft Endpoint Manager. It's an IT solution, if you will. This enables, pick any big organizations. They have thousands of employees and thousands of devices, different types of devices. And for an admin to make sure the right app is installed, make sure the right configuration is deployed, make sure the right network setting is configured, and a whole slew of other configurations are set, those devices, they can use products like Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So what we do is, produce our code. That tiny little star gets deployed to multiple servers around the world, and thousands of customers and millions of users and devices talk to those endpoints, and that will enable those devices to access the right app, access the right network configuration, and any other productivity tool a company and their employee may need, and do so in a secure manner. One good example of what by secure manner I mean is, think back maybe 2 years ago, it's been 2 years, when the pandemic hit and we all shifted from working from office to working from home or learning from home, you may be using your home device or a device which has a different security patch level. We still want to enable people to access those resources, be productive, but do so in a secure and confirmed way. And Intune enables that. And I find it pretty compelling that my little code I write gets deployed. It's that multiplication factor, right? Millions of devices, millions of users, and the impact that it produces, enabling work from home, learn from home, and so on. I find it pretty rewarding. We're very distributed across the globe. Here in the US, we have our in Redmond location, in Utah, Atlanta, in Boston, Cambridge. Internationally, we have offices in India, China, Israel, UK. We partner with other teams who have teams in Kenya. So pretty distributed. And we're hiring. We're hiring in Atlanta, hiring in Redmond, hiring in Utah, Cambridge. So would love to hear from you.
So if I can ask a couple of follow-up questions to get to know you a little bit better and your story at Microsoft. How did you get your foot in the door at Microsoft, and what was your first role when you came in?
My first role is actually being a contractor. What that means is another company hires me, but the job was being done for Microsoft. And the first team I joined dealt with software security. So any product that goes out of Microsoft goes through rigorous set of security verifications, right? Goes through what we call penetration testing, threat modeling, and things like that. And the team I joined first produced those tools. So my first gig is as an engineer, contractor. Eventually, that team wanted to bring me as a full-time employee, and rest is history.
Rest is history. So now, in your current role, what is the sort of the day in the life like for you as a group engineering manager?
Such events, we're hiring and expanding, so there is a lot of effort that goes into identifying talent, bringing the people that you hire, bringing them up to speed. So there's a lot of effort spent there. And that's, if I can plug in, as an interviewer, I'm cheering for my candidates, right? I'm investing my time, the organization is investing their time, candidates are investing in their time. So we all want it to work out. So just, I digress. So that's one thing. Lots of meetings. My time horizon when I'm looking at my day-to-day is, I have leaders to manage the month to month. So I'm focusing on what comes in 6 months, what comes in a year. There's lots of planning and coordination across organizations.
Awesome, awesome. So when you're hosting interviews, do you do the technical interviews and for PMs as well?
I lead an engineering organization, so mostly technical. Of course, even if you're doing a software engineering role, there is a little bit of project management aspect to it. So your ability to collaborate, your ability to prioritize, work with our product manager counterpart. Those are skills that you need. So those questions will come up in soft skill and planning prioritization skills.
Awesome. So since you do interviews, I think your perspective, and I wouldn't be surprised if everyone here on the team does interviews as well. But from your perspective, I'm a candidate, right? I've got a software engineering background, going to prepare for an interview with Microsoft. What advice would you give me as a candidate looking for a software engineering opportunity?
Relax, definitely, for the day off. Don't come. Interviews are naturally, there will be some nerves, but don't let that run too much of a concern on your side. The how you solve a problem is just as important as if you solve the problem. So are you methodical on your approach to solving a problem? As engineers are, in my view, are problem solvers. Of course, come with your fundamentals all, solid, right? You know your CS fundamentals, and you can approach a problem, translate a real-world problem into a computing problem, find an algorithm, and translate it. If you have a mental model, I ask you a question, have 4 sections. Identify what all the requirements that me or any other interviewer asks you. Validate that with a set of test cases, if you will. Give you A, return B. I give you C, return D, right? Those are validations. And once you've identified the requirement, validated with test case, you're validating just the requirement. Then come up with a design. This will be your algorithm and some flowchart, pseudocode, and things like that. And then the next part is translate your algorithm into whatever language you're comfortable with. Most interviewers don't care about what language programming language that is, that you know. So whatever you're comfortable with, translate it to code. And then remember to validate the code you wrote against the test cases that you'd come up at the beginning.
Awesome. This is really good insight. So let me ask a not so technical question. Let me just ask I guess, professional question or personal question. What is it that you like most about working for Microsoft and SCIM?
So one thing that I mentioned, enabling the transition from Office it may seem trivial, but there's a lot which goes to enabling that infrastructure. So the impact is not just you're producing code, but you're actually enabling work from home. Learn from home. My kids learn from home for a little bit. So seeing that impact is rewarding. And I work with people from vast different backgrounds. It's Microsoft is a melting pot of different cultures, different backgrounds, different perspectives, and best idea wins. That's the aspiration. So you get to sample cultures, you get to have that fight of ideas, and let the best one win.
Awesome. So Alan, let me thank you for being our keynote. And to our candidates, if you have questions specifically for Alan as a group engineering manager, feel free to drop those questions in the chat, and then Alan will ask you to keep an eye on the chat for any questions you might be able to answer. Sound good?
There was one question on the chat that came up. I don't know if we want to answer them in line or not, about the difference between Intune versus some of the other products like SCCM. Given it was part of the keynote, I don't know how you want to handle it.
Sure, I think that's fine. Typically,
Intune versus SCCM. Was that the question?
Yeah, it was. What's the difference?
Okay. Will, if you could, maybe we can quickly do move to the slide right before this one.
Sure.
Thank you. So functionally, they're similar. Both are device management solutions. Intune was born in the cloud, purely cloud. That means when customers buy us, they don't need to set up any infrastructure. They can talk to a cloud instance that we stand up, and we service them through that. Config Manager is an on-premise infrastructure. What that means is your company will have to set up a set of servers, deploy our software in that, our Config Manager software in those servers, and the devices will talk to that on-premise server, where, as you can see, that is now merging up to Microsoft Endpoint Manager. We're exposing a cloud-based interface, whether you're on the on-prem infrastructure or the pure cloud infrastructure.
Awesome.
I hope that answers the question.
Hope that answers the question. And Michael, thanks for pulling that one out. We will have an opportunity for candidates to ask questions that I'll ask during the panel discussion. But if you have specific questions for Alan, please drop those in the chat, and then Alan, you can keep an eye on the chat for any of those questions. Sound good?
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Michael.
Okay, so now what I like to do is I like to start to introduce the other presenters or panelists. So in the meantime, let me stop spotlighting Alem. And let me put the spotlight on Oluchi. So 1 second here, bear with me. So let me introduce Oluchi Chukwunyere, is a project manager within Microsoft. So Oluchi, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your story.
Hi, everyone. My name is Oluchi Chukwunyere. I'm a new PM on the Intune team, specifically working under Tunnel, which is our first class VPN provider. Recent graduate of North Carolina A&T State University, Aggie Pride, guys. I did see other HBCUs in the chat. So Spelman, Alabama A&M, and a few others. Graduated North Carolina A&T with a bachelor's in computer science. Recently joined the team in late September. My journey to Microsoft was a little different. Kind of started off the journey early. So my freshman year, I had an internship with Microsoft, the Explorer program, and had the opportunity to work on a different team, but still within Microsoft and get to see that aspect of things. Earlier on in my college career, someone recommended it's good to go around and try other companies, test everything out, see what you want to do career-wise. So I started out my internship as a software engineer, had the opportunity to go to other companies and try that out, both from the corporate perspective as well as from the startups perspectives, even dabbled a mix of outside of tech into venture capital for a bit, and then ended up coming back to Microsoft. Had the journey elsewhere, but came back here for a few things kind of to touch on the culture, the team I was going to be working on, as well as just the sense of camaraderie that I felt on this team, as well as like a few other aspects. Kind of to dive into my day-to-day. So I'm a recent technical program manager, specifically, like I said before, working under Tunnel, so our first class VPN provider. Usually my day starts off with, I have stand up with our engineers. So going off, if we're talking about different bugs that we've had, different feature updates, et cetera. Then working on the backlog, figuring out some strategy with how we may want to do a few releases, a few other meetings, talking with engineers, and like strategy and execution. I'm really at this execution stage of some of the projects that we're working on. So it's really making sure that we're pushing to releases and pushing to some of our previews. And yeah, I think that's a quick summary of kind of what I do, my background. Any questions, Will?
Yeah. I got some questions as an HBCU grad. So first of all, congratulations on the awesome opportunity there with Microsoft. But I've got a question for someone that, let's say they want to be a technical program manager at Microsoft. I noticed you have a bachelor's in computer science, so you got a technical background. How much does that technical experience that you have play into your role now as a TPM? Because I know a lot of program managers want to know how technical they have to be a technical program manager at Microsoft.
Yeah, I would say I'm very grateful for my computer science background. It helps a lot day to day, being able to like talk to the engineers and not only figuring out what they're doing, but testing our projects. So recently had an opportunity, yesterday actually on a call with one of our engineers testing out one of the features they were working on. So I had to go through and I have an iOS and an Android test device and had to work through, I was having a problem pushing down like a private certificate to my device, and we just hopped on a call. Kind of went through the troubleshooting process. I had the command line open. We were kind of going through it. I was sharing my screen, etc. So I would say that because I have previous experience as a software engineer, it does make things helpful. But I will say, coming in and working under a new project like Tunnel, there was a lot of things that I didn't know, and I had to get help, and I had to do the research on the back end. Had to spend time with our engineers, and you can have software engineering experience and then come in as a technical PM, and it may help, but the work that you're doing may not always correlate. So the work that I did previously isn't the same work that I'm doing now, and I still had to learn, still had to do that ramp up. So as long as you're willing to learn, as long as you're curious, like I think those are the big things.
Awesome. So what location are you working out of now? Are you remote?
So right now I am. Before I was working from like both New York and then North Carolina, but I'm moving out to Seattle soon.
Awesome. So you'll be closer to the team.
Yeah.
So let me ask, I know you've been there for 3 months, right? So let's say I'm a candidate. I'm excited about working for Microsoft. Maybe I'm going to get an offer. What was it like to onboard during the pandemic?
So onboarding, I would say my onboarding experience was really interesting just because getting my device to my house, I had problems logging in. So it took me like a few days before I actually got to use my computer. But once I got my login situation set up, I found that my team was great in like turning on their cameras. We were able to like chat, had like one-on-ones with different people, both that they set up, then I set up. And because I interned on the team previously, also during COVID, I kind of knew a little bit about like, you know, some of the, we've had new people join the team, but I knew some people previously. So it was more or less like I was seeing familiar faces again.
So do you think that internship experience helped you out? Like, did you still have to go through the interview process? What was that like?
Yeah, so I had to go through an interview process for that internship last year. And funny enough, I actually interviewed with Elem. So met Elem, he came down to A&T with Derek and a few other people. And at that time, it was just because of he came down to A&T and I had the opportunity to meet him through my organization, ACM. And then later on, it wasn't until I flew down to Seattle for my final round interview, back when flying around was a thing. He walked in. I was like, oh my God, it kind of eased the interview a little bit. It's like, oh, this is a familiar face, but still a great interview nonetheless.
If I could chime in, Oluchi aced it during the interview. She was doing more than the interview. I think you were organizing some of the events there too, right? You're leading the organization there. Yeah.
On campus?
On campus.
Awesome. Last question. This is one of my favorite questions, and I'm likely going to ask this to all of the Microsoft panelists. And that is, what is it for you, Oluchi, that you like most about working for Microsoft?
That's a hard question. I think one of the things that I like about working for Microsoft kind of goes back to not only the product that I'm working on, but the organization as a whole. I think during the time like COVID, where people were working from home and had to kind of switch from the big shift of, you know, work from the office, work from home, and dealing with that tunnel. Again, one of our VPN providers, being able for them to access their on-prem resources at home, go through the challenges of dealing with some of the things that they were dealing with, knowing that the product that I'm working on is empowering other people to like do more outside of the office, do more within their professional fields, was really inspiring. And then also back to the organization as a whole, Microsoft, there's a lot of people that I know within Microsoft have other things that they do that Microsoft empowers them to do. Whether you're, you know, a tennis player, you're a DJ, or you just have like a friend of mine started a trivia company, and just because she was enjoying that, and her team actually brought her on to do some more trivia games. So it's small things like that, you know, whether you're interested in, you know, tennis and your team is doing team-wide tennis games, or hey, you're a DJ and now Microsoft's hiring you out to DJ some events. Like, you can really bring other sides of you into work, whatever you want to share. And this is a space where that's welcome.
Awesome. That sounds like a commercial. We should cut that out of the video and use that. Nice. So, Oluchi, thank you for being one of our panelists. And for our candidates, if you have questions specific for Oluchi, please ask those questions in the chat. And then, Oluchi, if you can keep your eye on the chat for any of those questions you might be able to answer, and then we'll bring everybody back for the panel discussion after we introduce everyone. Thanks, Oluchi.
All right, sounds good.
Perfect. So let's introduce our next panelist, Michael Johnson, who's a principal software engineering manager out of the Atlanta office, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I recently relocated from Seattle, indeed.
Welcome.
Thanks for the intro, Will. I'm really happy to be here and just to share a bit about myself and my journey with everyone. These events are paramount, and I'll try and give you as much as I can. So if I run off a little bit, do cut me off, Will, if I take too much time, all right? As the deck says, I'm originally from Montreal, Canada. I grew up there, studied there. I started my first professional job there at Motorola as a software developer. I do speak French, although I grew up in an English household. But just being in the neighborhoods and everyone kind of being bilingual, you just pick it up off the streets, if you will. And that's kind of how I learned my French. in preparing for this talk, I was trying to find a way to kind of anchor it around something, and is really around maybe some keywords or attributes that can maybe somehow umbrella my journey that I potentially also may possess. One term that came to mind was adapting to change and growth mindset. And that's kind of the pillar of how I wanted to share the presentation. As a young child growing up and being akin to math and coming from a single household, I found myself moving around a little bit, but always finding myself adapting to change. And I think in the long run, although it was hard when I was a child, in the long run, I think it kind of helped me in my profession as I pursued my profession and my career here at Microsoft. So as it says in the deck, I studied at Concordia in computer engineering. I actually started in chemical and switched over, and more or less on the electrical side, sequential circuits and transistors is what I was focused on. And I got an offer at Motorola and Microsoft as a software developer, which was quite exciting after you do your degree, where I was relocated to Chicago for some time to write some embedded software on antennas. And I stayed there for around 5 years. And during my time there, I was contacted by a recruiter who was hiring for Microsoft, specifically Microsoft Auto was the group. It was a small kind of incubation group that was started up, and they were building the first infotainment system running on an old Microsoft OS called Windows CE, if you remember that. And Ford Sync was the product. And I was super excited about that offer. And I did an informational from a hotel room in Chicago, not really thinking that I was going to be asked a coding question. I thought it was more of a discussion, but lo and behold, in the informational meeting, I was asked a coding question, and I still remember the question till this day. It was ASCII to int, write the code to perform ASCII to int, and got through that problem and was offered to fly into Seattle for a 5-person interview loop. And after I realized that this is Microsoft, and they are going to, in fact, ask coding questions, especially if it was happening in the informational. I'm sure the 5-person interview loop would be 100 times more. I rolled up my sleeves and it took about 4 weeks to practice for the interview, to research what Microsoft was looking for, how interviews were conducted, how to present problems, how much practice do I need coding, and so on. And practically every day I took time out of my day to practice that. Went to Seattle, did the loop, or did the 5-person loop, if you will, and joined the company and moved to Seattle thereafter. And I spent some time with Microsoft Auto, about five years. And it was an amazing transition when I went to the company. It was at the time where engineers had their own offices, and I walked in and I had 2 monitors, and I remember vividly taking notice at the little things like the speed at which people type and how quickly they would type. And at that point, I was still probably in the hunt and peck mode, if you will. And it really brought some exposure to me that I really felt like I was a part of something big, if you will, in software. And it really, really excited me. Working for Ford Sync, I would see Super Bowl commercials on TV. My family knew about it. My friends knew about it. It was a really great way to start working for the company. So I worked with Microsoft Auto for 5 years and then moved to Windows Phone as a manager. I guess then embracing that change aspect again, where I was tasked with standing up a team in China and the US, and we were integrating the Windows Phone OS with Samsung devices, working specifically on driver development. And I did that for about 2.5 years. And right when Microsoft was transitioning to the cloud, if you will, and we started building services, I took the jump, or the leap, if you will, and moved over to a product that is now known as Skype for Business, but it had many names before. It was Unified Communicator and Link and so on. And I spent most of my tenure in that group, where I led teams in the back-end service space in Skype for Business, more the communication space, learning how to build services and manage teams in that environment, and embracing that change. And I stayed there for about 10 years, as I mentioned. And most recently, about 1.5 years ago, almost a year and a half ago, I took on a new charter to work with Intune, and Microsoft Endpoint Manager, specifically relocating to Atlanta and join a team and build a team here in Atlanta that would represent a portion of Intune. So we own a first-class product here that I'm happy to say that we've public previewed a couple months ago, and we're looking to GA it. And we continue to build our skill set and our team set here in the ATL. And so far, I'm loving it. And so if I look at that journey, that, about 14, 15 years, I've played a couple roles. I've gone from individual contributor. I was managing for a while. I did have a role of, I went back to individual contributor at one point because there was an opportunity for me to architect and lead a specific initiative. I did that, and now I most recently went back to manager. So I've kind of staggered along and played different roles, if you will, at Microsoft, which is amazing for me because it gives me a sense of I embrace change in a way. So I enjoy that fresh, new, I guess, feel of my everyday tasks. So I appreciate that about this company. And so I think that constant in my career was that, I guess, change and adapting to change. And I think that's one thing that I embraced and I continue to embrace, but I also think this company embraces that, especially in our environment of tech. I don't think we have a choice but to embrace change, be bold about it. And one of the aspects I love about the company is that Microsoft is bold and will embrace change and will execute against that. And I think that goes well with what I look for in my career and the things that motivate me and invigorate me to keep on pushing forward and be my best self. It's a great company. I work with phenomenal people every day, and everyone, I learn from folks every single day. And that's one aspect that I love about my job. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Do reach out if you like to connect. I'd be happy to connect with you and answer any questions. That's a little bit about me.
So can I dive in a little bit about your team? So can you talk a little bit about what your team looks like? How many people are on your team? What are skill sets that your team members have to have?
Yeah, my team's about 9, I believe, total. They range from, I guess, new grads to senior engineers. The skill sets, fundamentally, I think Alem talked about this. Fundamentally, it's the software engineering fundamentals is what I look for, particularly when we're hiring or when I'm hiring. How do you approach a problem? How do you solve problems? Can you translate the problem after you clarify the requirements and so on? Can you translate the solution into code? It's not necessarily about getting the actual answer right every time, but really the approach. And so as I hire or I look for candidates and we interview, we look for these traits, if you will, throughout the process, and to ensure that the individual will be successful for today, but not just for today. We also look for tomorrow, for their career, and also for Microsoft as Microsoft changes over time.
Awesome. So my favorite question, what is it that you like most about working for Microsoft?
Yeah, that's I touched on that a little bit. The first part is I don't want to say the first part. This is not really in order. Number one is that this company will support you in whatever you want to do. Meaning, as much as you give to the company will give back to you. So if you want to change and, let's say I am an IC right now, I want to go to management and I'm looking for a path for that. The company will support that and help you get there, or at least help you find ways to get there. There are avenues for you to explore almost anything you'd like in the company should you want to pursue it. I love that about the company. I love the fact that Microsoft is bold. It has, over the past, I'd say 10 to 15 years, it has morphed and changed in ways for the better to keep up with the times, if you will, and where we are in our current infrastructure and environment. We're here today, 2 years later after COVID, and we're still going strong. And I love that about this company. So as much as the company supports, as much as you support the company will support you. I love our leadership. think that's fantastic. And I think I touched on this earlier. The people that I work with, just the vast quality, diversity, the intelligence, bringing that every day, for me, allows me to know that I am playing with the best of the best. So I have to bring my best. And collectively, with that growth mindset, I believe everyone gets better. So that as well, I think, is a key for me.
I need to make that part of the highlight reel too. No, awesome. So, Michael, let me thank you for being one of our panelists, for sharing your experiences. To our candidates, if you have any questions specifically for Michael Johnson, because we do have two Michaels on the call today, please drop those questions in the chat. And then Michael J, if you would keep an eye on the chat for any questions that come up.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So our next panelist is Suresh Palani, Principal Group Engineering Manager as well. Suresh, if you're ready.
Hey, thanks, Will. Hey, everyone. My name is Suresh. I'm from India. I was born in a metro city in southern India called Chennai. About my journey, I worked for a dad, who used to get transferred and moved around multiple places within India. So I traveled and studied throughout India. And I did my college in a city called Bangalore in India. Some of you may have heard about it. And I worked for a couple of years in India, and that's when I got an opportunity to work as a vendor for Microsoft. And within 3 months of that vendor experience, the manager whom I was working for asked me if I want to join Microsoft, and I said yes. And I had an interesting interview experience where I flew to a city called Hyderabad in India, which had an development center there. And the folks who were interviewing here were working through the night and interviewing me from 11 in the night till 4 or something in the morning. So it will be easy for me to accommodate the hours in India. So it was a good experience. And then I came to Seattle in March of 2004. And the very first night we had, since I was working on this team for some time, we were about to release and we were going to go live, and there was a problem. And we worked overnight. On the first day I joined Microsoft and we solved the problem. It was an interesting experience that I tell my friends about. Since then, I've been in 4 different divisions in Microsoft. I started with Windows, where the focus was on building. At the time, all the testing was manual in Windows, right? And it used to take weeks of testing to release a product or a service update, etc. So our charter was building a test platform that will reduce, make it lights off testing for Windows. But it's a huge product, a lot of complex dependencies. Change in one part of the system could impact the other part. So we had to build a test framework where the testers could capture their test cases effectively and express them. So our goal was to reduce the number of testers in Windows from 3 to 1 at the time, right? And it was a 3-year project, and it was quite successful at the end, and I have good memories of it. After that, I moved to what is now called the Live ID, or the Microsoft Authentication platform. So I was one of the few developers who wrote the first version of what we call as the federated authentication, where one company could use their sign-in token to sign in with Microsoft instead of having to come and create a separate user account in Microsoft. Then I moved to Bing. I wanted to experience the consumer side of things, and I went to Bing. I worked in Bing Search for a few years. It was a highly technical team, and a lot of focus on algorithms and complex problems that we are solving. Right. So I worked on what is called the local search at the time, and my focus was what we call as data conflation. And so we crawl and get data from different sources about businesses and entities. We need to normalize the data, make it accurate, and then publish it. So when someone comes and searches for, say, McDonald's near you, it can give all the appropriate information, no incorrect or duplicate information. So those kind of fun stuff. So then I realized, I want to move to something core and meaningful, and that's when I realized, I want to be in the enterprise space, right? Where there is real money and real customers, much more hard focus on what we want to deliver and revenue, etc. That's when I joined what is called the Office 365 team there. And through this journey, I've been an individual contributor and a developer. And after I joined the current team, the team has morphed into a few different, reorgs. I became an engineering manager, and now I'm a group manager. And my core focus is building some infrastructure and platform components that is, being used as the backbone for multiple security and compliance solutions that our team is developing.
What are some of the technologies or software languages that your team uses to get the product out?
Sure, yeah. So I think Microsoft has come a long way. When I started, it was all Microsoft technologies. There was no scope of using, open source proprietary technologies. Microsoft has come a long way in adopting some of the open sources. So we use a variety of tools. When we used to start, it was primarily SQL, C#. At that time, a lot of C++, C was going on, right? So now if I look at it, we use variety of technologies. We use a lot of open source. We use Elasticsearch. We use Spark. We are also investigating, some using Flink, a few other things. Apart from it, we use a lot of Microsoft and proprietary technologies, C# primarily for most of our, coding and development, right? We also use some proprietary tools like Cosmos, which is a big data analytics platform inside Microsoft. So it's been a mix of things, and now we have much more flexibility in using the kind of tools that best suit the business rather than being focused on Microsoft technologies per se.
And if we picture your team, right? So like, how large is your team, and what is your team made up of? Is it all software engineers, or what does it look like?
Yeah, so my team is around 45 people now. So I have 4 engineering managers, and rest of them are individual contributors. So my team is slightly different because we also have managed infrastructure on which some of our production environments run. So I have a bunch of service engineers who are focused on deploying, managing the infrastructure, and I have software engineers who are building products, building the automations, building the customer solutions, or building the platforms. So it's a mix of service engineers and software developers. And we also created a new team called Site Reliability Engineering, where the focus is on making the product robust, responding to customer issues and escalations in a timely manner, and solving the problems for them. So that it's still a part of the engineering team, but the focus is very crisp in what they need to do on a day-to-day basis and how we execute on that.
Awesome. So my favorite question: what is it for you personally that you like most about working for Microsoft?
Sure. Yeah, I think many of our colleagues have already touched on many of these things, right? So I ditto to all of them, right? One thing I would say that stands out for me, specifically I would call out is the giving campaign. Microsoft has this grassroots, giving, infrastructure they created, right, where they're encouraging everyone to participate and give, to different charities or different things that they hold near and dear to their heart. And every year they have this month in October where you can, decide to contribute to a charity, or even you create some initiative and you contribute to it. You have your friends and colleagues participate in it. So that is one thing I would say, the social awareness, Microsoft creates within the company as a culture. That's one thing I would specifically call out, apart from what other folks have done.
Awesome. So Suresh, thank you for being one of our panelists, for sharing your experiences. To our candidates, if you have any questions specifically for Suresh, please ask those questions in the chat. And then Suresh, if you could keep an eye on the chat for any of those questions you might be able to answer.
Hey, definitely. Hey, thanks for having me. And I have put my LinkedIn profile in the chat, so please feel free to connect with me. I can answer any questions offline, and I also have a lot of open positions across the board, starting with, experienced people in the principal band, or even, to people who are fresh out of college. I'll be happy to hear from the folks.
Awesome. So definitely take advantage of that, folks. That's why I say you're in the right place at the right time. Thanks, Suresh. So if you'll hold on, I'll bring everyone in for our panel discussion shortly. But next, let me introduce Michael Wilde, Partner Group Engineering Manager. So Michael, if you're ready.
Sure. I just want to say that I'm surprised Suresh didn't say that his favorite thing was working with me for the last 10, 12 years, but that's okay. So Suresh and I are on the same team. So
Awesome.
as you can see, my name is Michael Wilde. I'm a Partner Group Engineering Manager at Microsoft. In terms of where I'm from, like everybody else has been saying, I was actually born in Northridge, but my father was in the military, so I ended up moving around a lot, and I spent 12 years overseas, 6 years in the Philippines and 6 years in Sicily, and then moved back to States when I was 18 years old. So after I moved back to States, I decided to actually start figuring out what to do with my life. I ended up going to college and getting a degree in computer science. And then I moved to Portland, Oregon, and started working for a company out there, working on some mid-market enterprise solutions, dealing with construction accounting and cost estimating. After staying there for about 5 years, I decided to look at different opportunities, and I applied online to Microsoft. And somehow I managed to pass a very challenging interview cycle and get a job over in the Microsoft Dynamics organization. My first product at Microsoft was with point of sale. So if you think about going through like Safeway or Walmart and going through the checkouts, it seems pretty basic that you have a product that you can go ahead and scan something and maybe add some taxes and stuff and get it to ring up a total and do a checkout. But there's a lot of back office stuff related to that. Each register has to work with or without connectivity, and then it also has to send all of the data transactions to a back office for reconciliation and settlement. That got me into the payment processing side of things. And I implemented a level 1 gateway processor for the Dynamics organization, which is still in use today, as well as just an online shopping cart system. Back then, eBay and things like that, PayPal were just coming online. This was back in 2004. And so we were really seeing how to do business-to-business transactions and get into broader areas versus business to consumer. So after doing that for about 5 years, I decided to make the jump over to the security side of the world, and I joined over in the Microsoft Exchange world. So we started looking at how to go ahead and create this Linux-based product over to Windows. And that's about when Suresh joined the team as well. And we actually did a V1 product where we actually converted all of the old legacy code from unmanaged code running in Linux over to C# running on a managed stack in Windows. Upon the transition, I have now become the group engineering manager of all of the filtering stacks. So my core responsibility is data protection. So we look at things like how do we prevent phish, spam, bulk or unwanted mails, as well as good mails and policy-based mails to be delivered or quarantined. That builds on top of a lot of the infrastructure that Suresh manages. Other than that, thinking back to the other questions, one of the things that I really like at Microsoft, is the amount of impact that we have. Being able to work on a system that literally has 12 to 15 billion transactions coming through it a day, having 60 plus petabytes of data a day coming through the system or being analyzed a day through the system is not something that you can get in most companies. We're literally working on bleeding edge technology that has true impact to our customers. And for me, that really drives me. It also means that there's some fires sometimes, but that drives me as well.
Awesome. So as a partner group engineering manager, what is a day in the life like for you?
A lot of meetings. So Suresh was talking about the number of people on his team. So I actually have teams over here in India, China, in Vancouver, and we're trying to expand. We have a team in Atlanta now for consumer. So there's about 170 people that work on the area that I'm currently on, either directly or indirectly underneath what I'm doing. And so in order to coordinate that, a lot of it gets back into what the others were saying. We have a strategic direction and a strategic vision that we have to drive. So one of the things that we're driving right now is how to take consumer, which is Outlook.com, Live.com, Hotmail.com, and really merge that into the enterprise stack so that we have a converged stack of benefit for everybody. Right now, our enterprise stack is significantly more advanced than our consumer stack. So by doing this convergence, we actually get a reduction in complexity, but we get a benefit in being able to deliver more features and provide more consistency to our customers. So my job is to make sure that those type of projects move forward. I have engineering managers just like Suresh and others underneath me who really manage the day-to-day of the individual features.
Awesome. So in your current role, how technical do you have to get nowadays?
So it depends. I can give you an example. I'm sure if you guys look up the news, you'll see my latest outage. So on January 1st, year 2022 at midnight, we actually had a worldwide outage in on-prem. If you look up Y2K22, you'll see it all over the place. So in something like that, I had to jump in. I am one of the best production debuggers on the team. Suresh is a very good production debugger on the team as well. So in that case, we were trying to debug an unmanaged product where we hadn't actually worked on it in about 12 or 14 years. And so in order to do that, you had to have some advanced skills. I know tools like WinDBG and kernel debugging, so I was able to get a dump and then debug that without having to wait for the source code to see where we were crashing. So it really depends. Some of us are very technical. Some of us are not quite as technical. It just depends on your skill sets.
Awesome, awesome, very, very impressive. So we're gonna go ahead and start our panel discussion. So let me take down my slides, but I'm gonna kick off the first question that I want everyone to answer, and then Michael, you can be the first one to answer. How about that?
Okay.
So let me disable my deck real fast, and spotlight, or actually I'll add everyone else to the spotlight. How about that? Okay, so I'm going to add our panelists to the spotlight so that everyone can focus on the Microsoft team. Add a spotlight. And Oluchi, if you're ready, you can turn on your video at any point in time. But let's go ahead and get started. So I felt like this question would be beneficial and interesting to everyone. And so I came up, excuse me, but this one's on the fly, but I think, like I said, it'll be beneficial to our candidates and interesting as well. So Michael, you can answer first. And the question is, what is it that you think, if you think back to when you interviewed to join Microsoft, right? So our candidates are listening to you guys, they're understanding the opportunity. They may have the opportunity to interview. So I want to know, when you interviewed with Microsoft, what is it that happened during your interview that you think helped you most to get the job?
So I actually responded a little bit in the chat as well early on. So when I look at skills, when I look at coding, Alem hinted at it. I don't care what language somebody knows. We can teach languages. I don't care what domain somebody knows. We can teach a domain, but we can't teach passion. We can't teach collaboration. And so the thing that helped me most, when I first came to Microsoft, I had just had a daughter. She was about 6-8 months old. And I had actually created a website. I have the domain babyalbums.com, and I created a website that I wanted to bring to the masses that allowed you to upload pictures and choose different themes and dynamically change it. Every single interview, somebody said, what do you do for yourself to help you learn and grow? And that was inside of ASP.NET at the time. And I showed them the site, and they were all intrigued. And I spent probably 30 minutes of every interview talking about that site, showing them. And I was probably glowing because I just had a baby girl. And so that passion, you can't teach that passion. We hire passion, because if you have passion, you can learn the rest.
Awesome. This is exactly what I was looking for. So I'm going to repeat the question. And like I said, I want everyone to answer it. And the question is, what is it that you think helped you most in your interview process when you joined Microsoft? So let's go to Michael Johnson next for that one.
Yeah, I love the spot on question. So I think it brings out kind of a more natural response, if you will. So keep them coming. To echo what Michael said, I think passion is it. And I think we talked about it. I think Michael Wilde, you also said it in the chat as well, that there was a point throughout my interview, because the questions, they change in shape. So some of them are a little bit more tricky, but the collaboration and participation aspect of it, including the passion. So it's kind of a collective thing, right? You can be passionate and be, high volumed and very well, I guess, heard. At the same time, if you can engage and get to the point where you are communicating your thought process and how you're solving the problems, knowing that you may be potentially stuck, and kind of articulating how you are thinking of getting out of it, that goes a long way with an interviewer, because then once you have the interviewer engaged and with you along the journey or along the ride, if you will, of solving that problem, then the interviewer can kind of see at least hints that you're showing signs you're going down the right path. And should you be independent, you would eventually either solve it yourself or ask enough questions so you get there eventually. And so that collaboration and participation piece, which kind of comes with passion, you kind of want to have to solve the problem, or want to solve the problem, if you will. I think went a long way in that one day that I had that 5-panel interview loop. On my 4th interview, I remember the problem, and it was a tough one, but I had that person's attention, and we were kind of, I don't want to say we were collaborating to solve it, but he knew where I wanted to go. And I think that was the one that kind of the straw that broke the camel's back to get me over the hump.
Awesome insight. Suresh, what do you think helped you most as you went through the interview process to get on at Microsoft?
I think definitely going to the basics, right? And making sure that you practice, right? Have a specific pattern in which you can answer the questions. That will help a lot in how you can refine your thoughts and put it in that format, right? And you can, like, nowadays we have a lot of these tools like Lead Code, where you can have different kind of problems that you can try, or you can go to educative.io, where you can find more design, system design, infrastructure kind of problems. Those are good things, I would say. Practice, I would say 3 months of good practice, that would really help in nailing the interview and getting a good offer, and getting a team of the choice.
Awesome. So Oluchi, I'm going to go to you next. When you think about your interview process, what is it that you think went well or best for you as a part of that process to get you in at Microsoft?
I'll take this back to like my first interview here, like during my internship, my freshman year, and I think it goes back to for me, I was curious and just tenacious. Similar to Michael, I had this experience where there was an interview question and I was kind of stumped, and it was just, at first, you first get an interview question and you're kind of stumped during the process. This is a company that you really want to join, so you're kind of anxious. But then it's like the curiosity kicks in. I just started asking a few questions, kind of probing it. And first it went in the wrong direction. Then one of the key questions I asked turned into the right question to lead me to the answer that I needed. But it was really like continuing to be curious about the problem because I wanted to solve it, and then not giving up when at first I was going in the wrong direction, asked the key question, and it turned things around. So I think that kind of translates to the job that I do now as a PM, asking a lot of questions, not giving up when deadlines aren't hit, and moving forward. But I think that's what's really helped me during my interview process.
Awesome insight. Alem, so when you think back to your interview at Microsoft, what do you think got you in the door?
Yeah, definitely lots of preparation. The not preparation to know all types of questions, but you get the sense of the patterns and how to approach it. And that gives you the, I described the 4-quadrant method earlier, just gives you that structure to approach it. If I can flip the question, me as an interviewer, even when a candidate didn't answer, answer in a traditional sense of a question, their drive for results inspires me. Their effort to admit what they don't know, that's okay. We don't always know everything. And then partner with you, work through the problem and find a path from where they're at the moment and making progress. That's what stands out for me. And yeah, and in my few interviews, there were people I said right after the interview and said, this is a person I want to work for, just from that experience where they enable you, and through the process of interview, I guess give you education, if you will.
Awesome. So to our candidates, I'm asking these questions on your behalf, but feel free to drop your questions in the chat that you would like for me to ask. And so I'll get to those if we have time. But the way I'm posing this question, a lot of you guys might be saying, wow, you know, Microsoft sounds like a great company to work for. And through my experience, I have a computer science degree. I was a software engineer, top graduate from Hampton University, HBCU. And I eventually got a job offer to work at Microsoft. And for me, it was the dream job, right? And I knew if I accepted that offer, I was going to be ready to prove and represent not only myself, but my HBCU and diversity and all that good stuff, right? And from the people, I didn't, the only reason I didn't accept the job is because I ended up doing HBCU Connect. And now here I am working with Microsoft anyway. So, but a great company, the people that I've worked with through these events that have gotten hired at Microsoft always say after they put in that work to prepare for that interview and they got that offer and they started to work there. Just last night at our event, it was a surprise to me. We did an event for another team at Microsoft. One of the panelists came to our event and got hired at Microsoft, but he prepared almost a year. He prepared for that technical interview. He got the job, and now for him, it's his dream job. And so we hear this over and over again. I think it's transmitted from our panelists how much they like working not only for Microsoft, but with the teams that they work with and the good people. And I'm seeing it myself as we do these events, some common denominators around the type of people that work there. So that's always great. So that's where these questions are kind of coming from. Now, so my next question, let's focus a little bit on diversity, right? So this event is a targeted diverse event. We've got predominantly African-American, some Latinx, and even other representation. So let's talk a little bit about Microsoft's diversity efforts. Are any of you all that are on the panel part of an ERG group? And if so, can you speak a little bit about Microsoft's ERG groups? ERG being employee resource groups.
Be a little bit more specific. Okay. Sorry, Will.
I'm sorry?
Be a little bit more specific. Sorry, Will.
So if anyone is a part of an ERG group?
Yeah, so in terms of, give an example of an ERG group. I don't know if I am or not.
Like a diversity focused group, like BAM, for example. I'm aware of Blacks at Microsoft. You know,
we have Pink on IP for it's a females group that the SLT team joins in on. Yeah.
Awesome. Has anyone else been Alan?
Yeah. Sorry for the background. The kids just got home from school, so a bit of energy going on. So yes, I am a member of BAM, which is one of the employee resource groups. And I think we have official 6 or 7 of them in the company. And the point of these organizations is just listen to the group, create connections within the group. You stay in a company not just because of the project you work on, but all of the various connections you establish. And these ERGs are a way to build that connection with the community, create that sense of community, and bubble up common message. So if there is any support needed and things like that, these ERGs facilitate that.
Awesome, thank you.
Just wanted to add to Alem's point on just not only BAM, but we also have a CIM, a SCIM specific BAM. So it's like kind of gets smaller into the group because Microsoft is a big organization. And I know for me, there's also BAM early in career. So for those that just started, it's a community of others who are like between 1 to 5 years out of undergrad or like graduate school where you can chat, talk about different things, and we have like different subcommittees. So there's really an opportunity where you can like build your community within BAM. It's not just like everyone within the organization, everyone within Microsoft, but it gets smaller and smaller, so you can foster.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
That's right. And if I may, Will, just adding to that, these communities are not necessarily only tech driven. At first, when I joined, I thought it might just be only tech discussions. I mean, there are cultural topics, if you will, in these communities that you can engage on. You can look for mentorship. You can look for folks with either similar interests in career. It's a great way to kind of extend and reach out your network, or at least a starting point. And it's just not just Blacks at Microsoft, but perhaps all cultures and communities, we have some sort of ERG or just an alias, if you will, for folks to be able to reach out to either share commonalities, professional direction, cultural opinions, whatever's happening in the world that you want to share. So there's room to either understand opinions, share your opinions, have a voice. So all of these ERGs will help facilitate that, those perspectives.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm going to start to integrate some of the questions I'm seeing in the chat, and I'm going to open them. So to the Microsoft folks, you guys can help me out if you have an answer to this question. Just feel free to volunteer to answer. So this question is from Amaya Ingram, and the question is, how are you able to stay on top of cutting edge technologies when transferring from company to company, or maybe from organization to organization or role to role at Microsoft? So if anyone wants to maybe speak to staying on top of the latest technology.
So I'll go ahead and jump in, and then others can go ahead and help. So one of the nice things that at Microsoft, as people have stated, is that we constantly have this influx of people, and we constantly have new problems that we have to solve. Very rarely do we sit down and say, here's a problem, let me go ahead and design something. The first thing that we do, because of time constraints, is say, is there something that already does this? Is there somebody who has already solved this? And then we start analyzing. Suresh mentioned that we have some custom-built things like Cosmos. Well, why did we need a diversified cold file storage system? Because when we looked, most of the stuff kept things in hot storage, and it was expensive. So we start looking around the world, and we start looking at other companies. And we have people who've come from Amazon and Google, and there's new people coming in and out all the time that share their vision and their thought and their experience. But we also go beyond. So if you look at people on my team, we have a constant transition between teams. One of the VPs at Microsoft, Charles Aleman, actually used to work with me, and Suresh used to report to me. So he's now over in Azure. If I have a problem, I'll go to him or one of his engineering managers and say, hey, have you guys done anything like this over in your area? So having that nice network of people that constantly gets new thoughts in really helps drive and keep you up to date with all the stuff that's coming out in the world.
Awesome, thank you. I'm looking at another question from the chat, and the question is from Cedric Witherspoon about being a TPM at Microsoft. Would you say having a Microsoft Azure certification could be beneficial for technical PMs? So I'll default this one to Oluchi on your insight, but if anyone else wants to volunteer, that's fine.
Yeah, I would say to Mark's point, it definitely doesn't hurt. Having more insight on the, like, not only more about Microsoft, but having that certification could be really like helpful in your day-to-day, depending on the team.
Awesome, awesome. So let me go back to some of my canned questions, and this one I'm going to default to Michael Johnson because there was something that you said in your presentation that I thought maybe I can direct this one to you. What are some of the most exciting aspects or projects that you may have worked on in your career at Microsoft?
Definitely the current one that I'm on right now is, I think it's top of the stack, not from the recency effect, but given that it's something that is being is starting from scratch. It's really, we're building, a product, in the Intune space that hasn't been done yet, and it's, when complete, it's going to enable an entire new, I guess, vehicle of scenarios, if you will. So that alone is, based on what I've done in the past, that alone is invigorating. In addition, I'll say, to standing up a team and watching that team accelerate and grow in the Microsoft infrastructure. So that is that part of it as well, kind of watching that mountain move, if you will. That's the first one I'd say. The second product that was really, I guess, exciting was that first one when I joined. I mean, they all were, but I'm just trying to remember the first one when I joined Microsoft, the Fort Sync, Microsoft Auto. That was a fun time because it was so, I was new to Microsoft, and it was front and center, and everyone around me that wasn't part of Microsoft kind of knew what I was going to. In addition to the company Microsoft, it was more than just Windows or Office. It was this consumer product, if you will, called Fort Sync, and that had a ring to it, and I was really, really proud to be part of that. So that was exciting for me as well.
Awesome. Awesome. So this next question is from Evelyn Lemko, and it actually ties into a question I was getting ready to ask for my canned questions. And that is around unadvertised benefits, working at Microsoft. But her question was about work-life balance. So if someone can speak to work-life balance when working for Microsoft. I'll default this one to Alan.
I was going to jump in, but go ahead, Alan.
I'm sorry. Michael.
All right. I'll answer this one, just to comment on one of your first questions. When you're jumping from company to company, even within a company, your learning should continue because the technology is growing, but there is always that transferable skill that you build, the problem solving, the core fundamentals and architectures that you can borrow from systems to systems, and that will sustain you. Back to this question. I forgot what the question was.
Work-life balance.
Yeah, that's what it was. So I think work-life balance. My wife worked for another high-tech company I wouldn't name. Work-life balance not comparable at all. Here, sometimes it comes in ebbs and flows. If you have a release coming up, it could go a little bit high, but net very manageable. There is a deliberate effort in the leadership to make sure that we're not signing up for more. If we signed up, find out what can drop off, and project sleep. So there is a deliberate effort to do work-life balance. And we do measure this through a yearly poll. Granted, that's just 1 year snap, but there's the regular one-on-ones and things like that where manager and employee get a signal. In this poll is one of the metric is work-life health index, and that tells you, or employees will voice their perception of how things are going and how they feel through those kind of polls.
Michael Johnson, did you want to add something?
No, I think he hit it. Just at the end, I was just thinking, even now, in the last 2 years in COVID, Microsoft has doubled down on work-life balance, meaning it's very easy to be in front of the screen for a very long time throughout the day, and that can have, it's been measured, it can have adverse effects on individuals' emotions, productivity, family life, all that stuff. And Microsoft in general is very, very cognizant of this and is really sending out, if you will, periodic reminders that folks, us, we need to make sure that we have the balance. And so not only is it just, it's present, but now more than ever is Microsoft pushing to make sure that we measure ourselves, keep ourselves in check, to say, hey, you need to have a balance here. It can't just be in front of the screen for extended period of times throughout the day. So Microsoft's really, really, really supportive of this.
I just want to add a couple minor things to this. So to further go on what Michael Johnson said and Alem said, our org and Microsoft as a whole takes pride in making sure that we listen and also hear what is being said by the employees. So when you look at the MS poll that Alem brought up, one of the things that came out from our team was the fact that we have a whole bunch of geos and the time zones don't align. We have Redmond, we have China, we have India. And so what was going on was that in IC and Redmond, because we have partners everywhere, we're having to have all these meetings starting at 7 in the morning all the way till midnight. And yes, they would get breaks throughout the day, but it's very hard to plan anything with your family. My kids have sports or school activities, things like that. So what we ended up doing was creating times, 2 4-hour blocks a week, one Tuesday morning, one Tuesday afternoon, or Tuesday evening, and one Thursday morning, one Thursday evening. That fits in, that says you can only schedule a cross-geo meeting if it is in these blocks. Now people can plan their schedule and their life, and if somebody has to stay from 8 to 10 p.m., they don't have to come in Tuesday or Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the morning. They can go ahead and adjust their schedules. But having that flexibility and saying, okay, look, we're going to lock down a cadence or a schedule so that not everybody's impacted is one way that Microsoft came by, and we brainstormed with the team to resolve this. This isn't something that people say, oh, I don't have good work-life balance. We ask why, and then we see what can we do that would rectify that to make your life easier. in terms of COVID, Harv Bella, who used to be our CDP, who recently left, he sent out 5 days and said, everybody gets 5 days of COVID time off. Here's the days I'm taking, and my SLT, my leadership team, is taking these days. We encourage you to take the same days or different days. But it's things like that they really have that empathetical view on how it's impacting you, and try to get you guys to, or try to get all of us to go ahead and really start thinking about our families. We're in it for the long run. We're not in it for the quick release in 6 months.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask one more question to our managers on the call right now, and then I'm going to go into next steps for all of our candidates that are interested in potentially interviewing. But this kind of leads into that, and that question is, can you speak to where the growth is happening on your teams geographically, and from a like a job or title type of employee perspective, like if it's engineers, if it's program managers, or even group manager, that kind of thing. Where is the growth happening on your team? So we'll start with you, Michael W.
So just to paraphrase, the growth on my team and where we're trying to focus is that
from a geographical perspective, so like where are you hiring, and then the types of people you're hiring?
So in general, it's similar. So right now, I have the flexibility to hire just about anywhere. We are trying to limit the number of time zones that we're getting into, but Texas is opening up. We're already in Atlanta. We have Vancouver. I have China. I have India. I have Redmond. I actually have a person working in Dubai right now, and I have some Latin America positions that are opening up. So we are pretty flexible. We haven't gone full remote, but we have a lot of centers. There is an opportunity to do full remote for some of the positions. That's something that we'll have to analyze. But in terms of geographic location, it's pretty wide open. And then what was the second piece?
The types of roles on your team.
We hire all roles. Me and Suresh are specifically hiring software engineers, software developers. But the team that we're on, especially at my level, we're hiring PMs. I responded to somebody who's interested in a red team. Obviously, we have security researchers, data scientists, ML engineers, analysts, peer researchers. So it's across the board.
Awesome.
Yeah. Just to give some context, we just had a meeting yesterday. There are 70 open positions under our organization, which includes around, I think, 17 PM and SRE engineering positions. So and across different levels. So this is a vast opportunity, right, for a variety of experience.
Awesome. Michael and Alem. Michael J. I'm sorry.
I can only speak for Atlanta. We are hiring in Atlanta. I think there's both PM and dev roles being looked at. There may be an M1. Alem can correct me if I'm wrong. In particular, though, for my team, I'm looking for developers. I'm an engineering manager, and I own feature product groups, and I manage developers. So that's what I would be looking for.
Awesome. Alan.
Yeah. So yeah, we're hiring in Redmond. Majority of my open positions are in Atlanta. These range from software development 1 to 2 to a senior, open for all levels between Redmond and Atlanta.
Perfect. So that leads me to my last point. But before we get to that, let me thank all of our panelists for sharing your experiences, for answering questions from our candidates as well. We really appreciate you. And for our candidates, I know if you're hanging on this long to the event, you're very interested in how you might interview. So what'll happen is make sure we have your latest and greatest resume. Let me bring up my screen quickly so that I can show you the URL that we set up to accept your resume. And that is right here. So basically hbcuconnect.com/Microsoft/SCIM. You go there, you can upload your resume. We should have all of your resumes already, but if you want to give us your latest and greatest resume based on what you learned this evening, please get that to us ASAP. And when I say ASAP, I mean like 24 hours. If you can get your resume to us, then what we're going to do is we're going to take your resumes, and we're going to share them with Jesse Sparks and his team to share with the SCIM team so that they can review resumes and start to match up talent with open opportunities. And so if your skill set and experience aligns well with a potential opportunity, then you can keep an eye on your inbox for a message from a Microsoft recruiter to have a quick phone screen where you can have a conversation, share your skill set, and then see if the timing is right for you to have a loop with one of the teams that is hiring. So that's what the whole intent is of this event, is for you to learn more about this specific team, and then also for you to potentially interview and be hired. All right, so good luck to all of our candidates. I want to thank all of you guys for coming, because if you guys didn't come to these events, we would not be able to have these events. So thank you all for coming. Thanks for your great questions and your participation. Again, thanks to the Microsoft SCIM team for participating in this event, for sharing your experience, and also most importantly, sharing your opportunities with our audience. So with that, I'll give the last word to our keynote. So Alan, if you have any words of encouragement for our candidates.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. Thanks everybody for making that 1 hour and a half. Whether you're interested or not, one of the things to do in network building is build your network, pick your connection, come with any questions, whether you're interested immediately or sometime in the future. So don't hesitate to reach out, ask question. If any of us don't know the right answer immediately, we'll be happy to connect you with who does.
Awesome. Thank you all. All right. So that concludes our event. Good luck to all of our candidates. And remember, make sure to give us your latest resume on our website. Okay, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.